Okay, hello everyone in the percussion world. You're looking at episode 2 of At Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and today is August 10th, 2015. With me today are my good friends Megan Arns,
Hello.
Laurel Black,
Hello.
and Ben Charles.
Hi, everybody.
Our guest today is a New York-based percussionist, owner and creator of Eagle Artist Management, section leader of Gallant Entertainment Incorporated, and provides drumline service for the New York Knicks, New York Giants, the Jets, the Rangers, and the Boston Celtics. Mike Eagle, I've never heard of any of those ensembles. Are those
No,
music
you haven't heard of them? They are fantastic representatives of new music, especially that which involves sport devices that normally have rebound and are thrown in a particular direction with high amounts of velocity. Yes.
Mike Eagle is also on faculty at SUNY Albany, and he is a championship Scottish and Breton specialist. So welcome, Mike Eagle. Thanks for being here all the way from France right now.
That's right. Thank you very much for having me. This is fantastic.
Now, you guys just won a very cool trophy that you showed us a minute ago. Can you explain a little about that and what you've been doing and who you have there with you?
Sure, no problem. So first of all, we have Tangi Boucher, and this is Ronan and Guellec. And we are currently in Brittany, France, which is the northwestern peninsula of France. And so Brittany is just the name of the area. It's not, obviously a different country or a town. It's an area, and it's what I typically describe as the area is one of the Celtic cousins. So if we use the word Celtic or Celticisms, especially in the United States, we normally immediately think of Scotland and Ireland, but there was an original 7. And Brittany is one of those original 7. And even though Scottish music and culture, Irish music and culture has made its way all over the United States, and whether we participated in it or not, it's very popular. The Breton music and the Breton culture, which is enormous and awesome, hasn't really found its way to the States. But it's certainly found its way to me, and it's become one of my greater loves in the world. I love coming to this area, and I love playing this music. And so what we just finished was what's called the Bagad Championship. So the group we play in is called Bagad Cap Caval. So basically that means the band from Cap Caval. And so a Bagad is this large Celtic ensemble, and we'll be sure to give you guys video links and website links and things like that so you can actually see Cap Caval in action. It's kind of hard to describe. So imagine, if you will, trying to describe what drum corps is to someone not familiar with marching band. This is kind of what we're going to try to do for you a little bit today, is explain, what a Bagad is. So a Bagad, I think we have 60 or so members in the Bagad? Yes. About 60, yeah. And so it's comprised of Highland bagpipes, bombards, which are these guys. Bombard's a very popular instrument all over Europe, but it is the lead voice of the Bagad. And then there is also a Scottish snare line. We also use Scottish bass drums, but we have one performer who plays, this year, she played 8 bass drums. So the bass drum basically acted like an upright bass guitar would, in a jazz group or whatever. And then we also have all manner of non-melodic percussion. So anything under the sun, we can use in the Bagad. And it's a super, super cool thing. And this is my 5th or 6th year to come and to play in the Bagads, and this is my 2nd year with Bagad Cap Caval. And Bagad Cap Caval just won the Bagad Championships for the season. And of many things we were handed is this little guy, which is pretty cool. And to me, oh, merci. This is really cool to me, because this shape of trophy, I see these guys have 1 million of them at each of their homes, because they're very accomplished Breton musicians, and so it's really cool to see that traveling around with us now. But yeah, we did the the big gig, if you will, on Saturday, and then we were invited to another town in the region to do a parade, another performance. So we kind of got an encore day of performances after the contest, which was fantastic. But these two guys I wanted to have on the show with me. I thought it was important because this guy, Ronan Leglec, has basically been my teacher of this music and this drumming. So while they use Scottish snare drumming, they use the style, the vocabulary, etc., they only play Breton music. So you'll never hear a Bagad, not in a contest or traditional setting anyway, you'll never hear a Bagad play Scottish or Irish music or pop music or anything like that. They only play traditional Breton music. But the arrangements and the way they create their suites, anything goes. And so what is most appealing about Cap Caval, particularly to me, is that they have a very classical approach, and I mean that in the way that we would mean that in anything that we would refer to. Like this marimbist has a very classical approach, whatever. And so Ronan, when I first came here in 2010, basically said, oh yes, we'll take you and we'll teach you how to play the Breton style and to understand the music. It's almost entirely, if not all, dance music. So learning the variety of dances and the tempos, so on and so forth. I feel like Ronan knows every town in Brittany, every road, and every associated dance of everywhere in the area since the dawn of time. He can tell you who got off the boat and said, this is Brittany. This guy can tell you that. So he's been a huge influence of mine for sure over the past 6 years, and it's become a real honor to play with him in this ensemble. Tangi Boucher, again, is another one of the more accomplished drummers and percussionists in the area. I think Tangi first played snare drum in a performance at 1.5 years old, and that's very impressive because that seems otherwise impossible. So we kid, but at the same time, how old were you, Tangi, when you actually first played in a contest?
9 years.
9.
It was a solo competition. I started with Bagad Cap Caval at 11.
11.
Wow.
In the highest grade, 11 years old. There are these famous pictures of Tangi standing on a box so he can be at the same level as the other snare drummers. It's fantastic. It really is. So
Mike, if I could interject real quick, I just wanted to say, with that level of expertise and that accent, I would like to fire Casey as the host of the show and hire Tangi.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm with you, dude. What am I gonna say? I mean, yeah, I understand, man.
Right. No, but I'm really glad. I'm very, humbled and honored for you guys to ask me to do this, for any reason. But I thought it was perfect timing since annually I come to Brittany, and that's immediately followed by the World Bagpipe Band Championships in Glasgow. And so this has been kind of a normal routine for me now. Every August I come spend a week in Brittany. We spend all day, every day rehearsing. It's kind of drum corps style. You show up at about 9 or 10 every morning and you rehearse until midnight. You spend the majority of the day in sectionals, or the design team of which we are all a part of for Cap Caval. We, change ideas and things develop, but everyone in the Bagad, all 60-something members, are there at what we call the locale, or the local, which for Cap Caval is this awesome, giant performing arts center. We basically get the whole building for a week. It's awesome. And so we'll spend time with our individual sections, working everything out, come together for ensemble at the end of every day, and do it again the next day. And so it's interesting because while competitive Scottish bagpipe bands, they rehearse, basically year-round. They meet for rehearsals about once a week. Bagads don't operate that way. Bagads get together the week before the contest to start putting the 12 to 13-minute suite together. And so for me, it feels more like a professional situation rather than just a regularly occurring rehearsal schedule. So we spent all of last week rehearsing. We did we had several performances interjected in there, did the big championship, so on and so forth. And then again, next week it's on to Glasgow. So another reason why I thought it'd be cool to have these guys is because they both have extensive experience in Scottish bagpipe bands. Ronan played for the Australian Highlanders for a few years, and Tangi, along with leading Bagad Cap Caval, also leads pipe band Cap Caval. Cap Caval is the only organization from France to facilitate a professional bagad and a professional pipe band, both of which Tangi is the leader. And he's also played with other professional Scottish groups from Scotland as well. So these guys are not only two of the most accomplished drummers in Brittany, they've traveled all over the world for Scottish drumming, similar to myself.
Quick question for Tangi and Ronan. Do you guys, is this what you do for a living?
I mean, in Brittany, especially, it's quite hard to live with this. The only way would be to teach. So there are several teachers that are paid to do this, but it's not infinite possibilities. So we each of us have another job.
It's just really beautiful that you guys just love this as much as you do.
In the Bagad, it's we only have a few people living from the music, and all the others are like us, having another job and coming every weekend to practice and booking a 1 week holiday before in August to prepare the championship.
Ben, do you have a topic for us?
Yeah, so I'm doing a history topic each week, and since we're talking about kind of rudimental drumming, I figured I'd talk about something to do with that. So this week I wanted to talk about John Pratt, who many of us have played out of the Pratt 14 Modern Contest Solos, or another one of his 4 or 5 books that he has published. So for me, when I started playing music way back when, I think in 2nd grade, I started on piano, and all the composers I knew of were like Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin, all these guys. They were all dead. And that was kind of a theme to me, that if you were a composer, you were dead. That was the only reason that people would play your music. So when I started playing percussion a few years later, it was really cool to me to find out that not all composers are actually dead. There are actually living composers. Casey Cangelosi is one of them. And so I was researching John Pratt, and I found out that he's actually alive. The most recent kind of article written about him I found was in 2006. But I asked Bill Mersch, who knows everything about percussion, and he said as far as he knew, John Pratt was still alive. So if I'm wrong on that, it's Mersch's fault. It's not my fault. But anyway, John Pratt, he goes with his friends by Jack. John Pratt was born January 13th, 1931 in Seneca Falls, New York. He started drumming at the age of 10 in his school band and orchestra. In 1947, he went to the VFW, that's Veterans of Foreign Wars, post in Seneca Falls to hear a drum and bugle corps. And that's where he met Norman Peth, who was the teacher of the group and would become Pratt's teacher in the future. And if you've played the 14 Modern Contest Solos, you know the last one is My Friend Norm, and that's dedicated to Norman Peth, his teacher. So he followed Peth to Geneva, New York after that to play in the Apple Knockers Drum and Bugle Corps. Once he graduated high school, he joined the Army, and he auditioned for the West Point Band. And I found this story really kind of interesting. He was asked to sight read and play something from memory, much like a lot of auditions today. And he didn't have anything prepared, so he improvised something. And he was so good, even improvising, that they accepted him into the group. So he stayed at West Point in the band for 22 years, his entire military career. And while he was at West Point, Leopold Stokowski, the famous conductor, stopped by for his to celebrate his 90th birthday at West Point. And Stokowski actually met Pratt, and Pratt played for him, and Stokowski really enjoyed hearing Pratt play. I found that interesting. And Pratt said that Stokowski was one of the most knowledgeable conductors about percussion that he had ever met. And interestingly, Stokowski at one point had experimented with putting marimbas in the bass section of the orchestra to get some more clarity. It didn't work out, sadly, but Stokowski was really interested in percussion. While Pratt was in the Hellcats, he played alongside Dennis DeLucia, who many of us know from any sort of marching percussion activity. And Pratt was known by his friends for being maybe a bit quirky. I found one anecdote that Pratt was known for being on his roof of his house, watering his lawn.
I read that. I did see that.
When people asked why he did that, he always replied that he wanted the grass to think it was raining. I don't know, just kind of a really weird anecdote about him.
That sounds like something I would do.
Probably me too, honestly.
Serious concern, yes.
So
I wouldn't do that. I don't think the grass would know the difference. I mean, I'm not a biologist or anything, but I just don't think it would know.
Casey's smarter than the rest of us. So he taught, after he retired from the Army in 1969, he taught high school English at Hackensack High School in New Jersey for 25 years until 1995. And while he taught high school English, he still kind of maintained his activity in the rudimental drumming world. So in 1999, Robin Engelman of Nexus fame met John Pratt for the first time, and I thought Robin Engelman's quote on it was really kind of perfect about this. Robin Engelman said, "To learn that he was still alive, a member of a fife and drum corps, a published poet, the author of an acclaimed thesis on the poetry of John Keats, a teacher of the English language, a composer of dozens of rudimental snare drum solos, a selfless propagator of the art of rudimental drumming, and an honorary member of the Canadian rudimental organization Cadre, was only half as revealing as actually meeting him in person 40 years after discovering and falling in love with his great book, 14 Modern Contest Solos. John is one of those people who arrived at the right time with the talent and will to change the direction of music." And at that meeting in 1999, Pratt gave Engelman 25 or 30 new pieces that he had written since his previous books were published, not knowing that Robin Engelman would immediately take them to a publisher and have the publisher get in touch with Pratt to publish those solos in what's called, I think it's the title is actually The New Pratt Book. And so John Pratt was inducted into the Percussive Arts Society Hall of Fame in 2002. And I've heard that his acceptance speech was, to that day, the longest acceptance speech ever given by a PAS inductee until Lee Howard Stevens several years later. But yeah, so that is John Pratt in a nutshell, who is luckily still with us at, let's see, he was born in 1931, so he is now how old? Let's see here, math is hard. He's now 84 years old, still with us.
Wow, we could have him. We could have him on. Wow, Ben, thanks so much. Great job. I would love to know someone over there in France, maybe Tangi. How is John Pratt part of? Does he ever come up over there?
No, not yet.
Still working on it. Yeah,
we should send them a copy of the Pratt book.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised either way, but it's like we all know, these pieces, and so I guess I would like to ask Michael, how you've gone through all these different rudimental styles, but I imagine you started where like we started. How still, I don't know, like how much of the Pratt style is still in your hands?
I could read down both books right now without batting an eye, is the answer to that, simply because I've played them so much over the years. To me, it's, the Pratt book was one of the first, let's call it, virtuosic or challenging things that was handed to me beyond, simple orchestral drumming studies, right? And so it was really the first thing that fueled my fire and made my hands, my head, and my heart fall in love with drumming and percussion, And so now that's really helped me realize what is there on planet Earth as far as drumming is concerned. And there's only a few big worlds. We have contemporary American, we have Scottish. In my mind, you know, a subsect, if not a separate version of that, would be the Breton drumming that we do here. We have the great granddaddies of them all, and that's the Swiss Basel drumming. But then we also have old school American drumming, if you will. We have traditional fife and drum drumming that still exists today. It exists today in large part like it did back in Pratt's time when he was living on the East Coast. And so the Pratt book is one thing, like to be able to play that, you know, with some friends or on my own on a pad at home, but to be involved in the fife and drum community, that's something totally different, but goes in the same genre, if you will, as the Pratt book. So I actually just maybe about a month ago went to a couple of the big musters. I went to the Deep River muster this year, and you know, saw a lot of guys that we see at the PAS events in PASIC every year, because those guys travel across the country to continue being a part of that community. And so to me, that, you know, Pratt, you know, was one of the first, you know, that said, okay, we don't need fifes, we can make music all by ourselves with this style. And so that was a huge influence on me, and it's made it to where I have to go to those musters, especially now since I live on the East Coast. It's kind of silly that I wouldn't go and be a part of that. So I mean, I think that's really what it is for me. It was the first thing that really set me on the path that I am today as far as my love of rudimental drumming, and it made me want to find out what else is out there. And so in a way, this is a great parallel, because perhaps if not for John Pratt in that book, I probably wouldn't be here in France doing this awesome stuff with these awesome people. You know?
You know, Mike, when Michael and I met at the Atlantic Symphony Orchestra Modern Snare Drum Competition, and because you just mentioned all these different styles of snare drum playing, I mean, that competition certainly had the majority of this really contemporary modern style. How did you feel as like this totally different, like two genres removed entity coming in? And by the way, that was amazing. His clinic was fantastic. Your performance was fantastic. Mike was able to judge with everyone else like no problem. Like understands all these styles really well. But how did you feel as being like, you know, 2 or 3 styles removed from what most of the competition was kind of all surrounding?
I loved it. I mean, you know, I have my master's in percussion, and one of these days I'll try to be a super smart guy and, you know, get the doctor thing going on as well. And so for part of me, it was nice being, that's right, that's what doctors wear, right? Is this
yeah,
thing?
they still use those. Yeah,
I see yours in the back.
Bugs Bunny doctor has one of those things.
Right. So for me, it was literally, you know, having the opportunity to wear multiple hats in the same event, which I love to do. I've kind of described myself as a jack of all trades, master of none in percussion, and for me personally, that just fits my personality and what I like to pursue. And so at that particular contest that for Casey and I met, I felt very at home there, because in part I got to see some fantastic symphonic players and help them improve on their paths, and I got to speak to them about this whole other world of drumming and percussion that I feel deserves more exposure, and it deserves to be in scope in Western academia. So to me, I mean, I felt it was exactly where I would want to be, to help younger musicians progress themselves in our normal symphonic and classical walks, but then also to introduce them to these other enormous worlds that are out there that I think there'd be a lot of other people that would do what I do if they only knew about guys like Tangi and Ronan. And if they only knew about, you know, Scottish snare drumming and the pipe band community, how close it is to us in the United States, so on and so forth. So I loved it, Casey. I thought I think it's kind of part of perhaps what I'm meant to do, is to kind of help introduce, you know, the Breton community to other, you know, musicians in percussion in the United States, or introduce Scottish snare drumming to other musicians and percussionists in the United States. So I loved it. I loved every bit of it.
It was certainly successful. I mean, I know, of course I knew about that style, but I feel like I really knew something about it after you came, and credit goes to Tom Sherwood too for having the insight to bring you on. I believe Ben has a question for you guys.
Yes, I had a question. We're talking about, like I was asking, did the Pratt book ever make it over there? And you're talking about this, blending of symphonic and rudimental styles and all, and the big classical symphonic snare drum studies in America, a lot of it comes out of the Jacques Delecluse book. And I know Rob Knopper, who's the percussionist in the Metropolitan Opera, recently did quite a bit of research on that and actually went to France and interviewed Delecluse, and he asked Delecluse, are you aware of how popular your book is in America, and that it appears on every orchestral audition and all that? And the Delecluse book seems huge here, but it sounded like Delecluse was almost kind of unaware of how big of a deal it really is here. So, I mean, I know that these guys aren't necessarily classically oriented players, but is the Delecluse method popular over there? Are you familiar with Delecluse? And, how have you ever studied it? Anything like that?
See, so Ben, I understand your question, and to me this is really fascinating because, again, coming from, I'm, spawned from Western studies, you study Delecluse, of course, and so I come over here, oh, you guys must know Delecluse, you must be masters and have his and yet they've never, they haven't even heard of them, because of course, in symphonic or orchestral snare drumming, there is this French style that we all know and can hear right away is very distinct, and yet these guys, I mean, these master drummers from an area of Brittany are completely removed from that style. That style really is fairly, let's call it metropolitan, fairly Parisian, and is limited to those who have been around the conservatory for many, many decades. I think Breton drumming is similar to the fife and drum community in the United States. It's folk music. It really is. Now, where the Bretons have taken their folk music to just another level, there's I mean, almost everyone in the area participates. The bands are enormous. The Bagads are enormous. The music is wildly virtuosic, but it is in large part, it is folk music. The fife and drum community in the United States, I'm so glad that it's preserved the way that it is, but it's not as centered around competitions, and it hasn't really, it's kind of taken itself in preservation. It's a time capsule, whereas DCI, WGI, BOA, etc. has been the evolution of what was American drumming, let's say about 100 years or more ago, right? So it's a different thing in France. There is the symphonic community, which is almost entirely limited to the greater Paris area. But in this unique area of France is this whole other world of folk music that has deep roots in their traditions of how they sound and how things are, but have developed vastly as far as instrumentation and composition, so on and so forth. But yeah, just two different things, the symphonic guys and the folk guys, for sure.
Beautiful, beautiful. Megan, do you have something you'd like to talk with Michael about?
I do, yeah. So my segment is kind of on current events, and first of all, I have to say that my primary music education was in a fife and drum corps. So I'm coming from a little bit different. I was in band in 4th and 5th grade and things like that, but my main education from 7th grade through high school was playing in a fife and drum corps. A lot of times I was playing snare drum, but most of the time I was playing fife, actually, which is...
Megan, where was that?
Little known fact about me, St. Charles, Missouri. It was a corps called the Lewis and Clark Fife and Drum Corps. And the time period when I was in it was when the bicentennial, right before the bicentennial of the Lewis and Clark celebration was happening. So we were kind of the official corps of the Lewis and Clark bicentennial. So we had a lot of attention. We traveled to Monticello, played at Thomas Jefferson's home, and kind of followed Lewis and Clark's path
Super cool.
to the Pacific Ocean. It was really, really cool. So I have a pretty good understanding of American historical drumming, and I have to say that I'm so thankful that the Pratt book or that John Pratt's music and Charles Wilcoxon's music has become a part or has stayed a part of the American classical study, because that's really kind of our only link. And I completely agree with you, Michael, that it's more historical preservation than competition. Now, there are some really fantastic groups out there, but honestly, some of them are more in the Scottish tradition anyway, like the 42nd Royal Highlanders. They're one of the top ones in the United States, and it's not pure American music. So the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps is probably the best representation of that.
The Old Guard and the Hellcats for sure. You know,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So growing up in this Fife and Drum Corps, I always knew about the Basel tattoo, and we always dreamed that we would go abroad. We did go to Germany one time for a Sister Cities celebration, but we always wanted to go to the Basel tattoo. So I was in France actually a couple weeks ago for the World Saxophone Congress in Strasbourg,
Wow.
so the other side of France.
Yeah.
And on the way out, I visited Basel, Switzerland, which is the site of the Basel tattoo, and found the venue where it was going to happen. And I was a couple days early for the actual tattoo, but it was so cool to actually see the site that I had always dreamed about going to. So I wanted to just talk about the Basel tattoo for a little bit for our listeners who might not be familiar with what a tattoo actually is, besides like an imprint of ink on your body. The Basel tattoo is an annual military tattoo, and it's performed by international military bands, display teams, popular musicians, and tattoo formations in Basel, Switzerland. So really an interesting mix of different groups, not strictly military. And people come from all over the world for this. And a tattoo specifically is a military performance of music or display of armed forces in general. And the term actually comes from an early 17th century Dutch phrase, do den tap toe, turn off the tap, which translates to turn off the tap, which was when the drummers and the trumpeters would signal to instruct innkeepers near military garrisons to stop serving beer and for soldiers to return to their barracks. So that's where the term actually comes from. Which is
All
really,
right.
yeah, and the Basel tattoo is not an ancient festival. It only started in 2006. So this year was only the 11th time that it happened. And it occurred, let's see, when was it? It was July 17th through 25th, so just a couple weeks ago. And it was started by the local top secret drum corps, which I think we've probably all seen some videos on YouTube of like, what is this thing? Where does it come from? It comes from Switzerland. There are definitely some American drummers that were in that too. I don't know if you guys know anything about that. Yeah. But it's grown very, very, very quickly in these 11 years to become the world's second largest military tattoo. And that's second to the Edinburgh military tattoo. And it's interesting also that you mentioned DCI, Michael, because one of the highlights of this year actually was an American group. It was the Blue Devils, which we talked about in our last episode with Brian Calhoun. And it wasn't, since we were in the peak of DCI season here, it wasn't their main A corps, but it was their international corps, which is made up of alumni from the group. And yeah, so they were one of the featured performers. Other performers came from, obviously, Switzerland, Australia, Canada, Germany, Ireland, Italy, New Zealand, Oman, South Africa, South Korea, and the UK, England and Scotland, and the United States. So really interesting. And it's also interesting that all these festivals are kind of happening around the same time, kind of the same season. Do you know why that might be, Michael, or have you found that also to be true, or are there festivals happening in the winter as well?
I mean, as far as tattoo-y or tattoo-ish sort of things, you're right. I mean, the Edinburgh Tattoo Arts Fringe Music Festival occurs almost at the same time as the Basel Tattoo. Do either of you guys have an answer to that? Why is it, some of these large international festivals in Europe and the UK seem to happen all at the exact same time? Is it simply because it's summer? That's a good time to do fun things?
Yeah, I guess it would. Maybe
Yeah.
it's the same. In Brittany, we have a lot of festivals during the summer, but they try not to be at the same time. But you have a lot of festivals one weekend, and the next one the next weekend. But I guess yes, it's just for summer, and there is more people to visit as well. So.
For sure.
Right.
Certainly there's correspondence between the Bagad community and the Scottish community. I mean, they will not have the World Pipe Band Championships and Bagad Championships at the same time. But for instance, DCI World Championships was the very same day as the Bagad Championships this year. And for me, I mean, you know, I marched Phantom Regiment back in the day, but I haven't been to a finals, DCI finals, since 2004, 2005, one of those two. And people have asked me, Mike, why are we never seeing you at finals? And I said, well, I'm in France and Scotland, you know, and I would love to be at DCI finals. I would love to teach a drum corps perhaps or write for one, but you know, and at this point now, I've been to France and Scotland more than I performed or taught at DCI finals, but they're always happening at the same time, which is a big bummer for me. But at least as far as over here, they're gonna try not to have them right on top of each other, because we've got people like this who a lot of times do both.
Speaking of you as an arranger, Michael, I just have to tell everyone a quick story. Michael said he was going to take a marimba solo of mine and wanted to have a student perform it and then make an arrangement of, what was it, 5 snare drums? 6?
Whoa. Well, which project are we talking about?
When you did that character marimba piece, and then I saw it at Pesach?
Yeah. That's right. For marimba, and it turned out to only be 4 snare drums. You know, there's balance concerns, of course.
4 snare drums. Yeah, a few balance concerns there. 4 snare drums, and I thought to myself, like, oh, yeah, I can't imagine that being cool. I can't imagine that being good. And it was, like, so good. I was so surprised. I was so pleased. So, I don't know. So cool.
And then you also did White Knuckle Stroll, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That too, right? Oh, okay, yeah. Now I know why you were confused about the first one, because there was a second one. Yeah, we did a duo together, and likewise, yeah, your arrangement of your part was, yeah, I mean, just so tasty and nice, and just really, really nice.
And is that duo version published?
Well,
That's
I mean,
a point of much discussion between Michael and I.
I gotcha.
Sure. I mean,
Casey's being a little too demanding on the royalties, huh?
Yeah, exactly right. No, I've actually, it's been fairly humbling. I mean, how many people have contacted me about the pieces I played at PASIC this past year, and you know, they're just, even though we're almost a year removed from that, I honestly just haven't taken the time to put those pieces of music somewhere appropriately. And I mean, you know, I've talked to Casey about this a lot, you know, trying to maybe even think about doing self-publishing, but long story short, the answer is no. Are they available, and will they be available in the future? Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
they will.
Yeah, in our duo, the problem is Casey keeps going, yeah, I'll think about it, man. I got to get to that. And like, oh, yeah, let me think about that. But I don't know. The fact that you asked shows me that, like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe people are interested. So, yeah.
There's been some questions that come up for sure. Well, another thing that people ask me all the time is, where can they find resources and information about this stuff I do in France, or the stuff that's going on in Scotland, right? And I would like to hear, before we talk about that, before we talk about resources or the lack thereof, unfortunately, to create some parallels with what Ben brought up and what we were discussing as far as how we were all kind of brought up and raised. I think it is remarkable and interesting if these guys could share a little bit about how they were raised in music. You know, because all of us, I think all of us on the panel and me, we are similar creatures. And though we have maybe different specialties, I think we were all brought up in a similar way, where these guys, I think, were brought up in a very different way, a very un-Western, un-American way, let's say, which is awesome. So Tangi, who performed at his first Bagad Championships at, what age were you, Tangi? 11 years old. Tangi played at his first, and so this was Bagad Championship number what for you?
It was my 15th season.
His 15th season playing at the World Bagad Championships.
In grade 1, I played before in grade 5 for 3 seasons, maybe 3 or 4.
Awesome. Anybody here playing at international championships before, you know, they hit double digits?
I was a pretty big deal in Little League soccer.
Oh, you had that going on. Well, Tangi, please talk to us a little bit about how you were raised in music, Breton or otherwise, and how you became what you are today.
Traduction. In my family, I'm the third generation of player of music. My grandfather plays bombard, my father plays bagpipe, me I play side drum, and my daughter plays side drum too. So it's a family story for the music. I discovered the music when I was young. So
it's cool.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Ronan has two kids, Elena and Erwan, and Elena is seven, and you hear her just humming to herself these traditional Breton tunes, or the tunes that we spend all week, sweating over to learn. She's in there singing them, and I mean, it's absolutely remarkable. And even his youngest, who is 3, Erwan.
Erwan is 3.
3. Even you can hear him humming some of the tunes that we're playing. It's remarkable. And at our rehearsals all week long, there are kids everywhere. It's kind of like a daycare center, and you can see them, like you can see the joy in their face and how much they love being around all of it. And I mean, me personally, I mean, there was no one in my family that played music before me. I was around a lot of athletics, maybe not soccer style Casey Cangelosi, but there was no music in the world. There was only sports and southern things, which was all good. But when I see all these kids around such a high level and such hard-working people, it's remarkable. Tangi also has a pretty cool family tradition. What about you, Tangi?
It's quite the same. My father played bombard in the Bagad previously, so I discovered this world, we could say, very early, and I wanted absolutely to play a side drum. I don't remember why. I've seen people playing it very good, so I wanted to do the same, and I started learning at 6 years old. So at first they wouldn't accept me because I was too young. But because my father knew the teachers and they knew that I was not, I really wanted to learn, not just be there to spend some time. They accepted that I started even if I was very, very young. So, and since that, I've taken lessons, but I think it's very different from what you do, because we don't learn traditional music in a faculty or school, or it's very it's an association.
Yes,
it's a parallel. Whereas in Scotland, they have lessons at school. In primary school, you can learn bagpipes, you can learn Scottish snare drum. Here in France, it's not possible, so it's a hobby.
Right.
Another one.
And even going back to the question, that I get all the time, Mike, how do I learn more about Scottish drumming or Bagad things, etc.? When you guys are taught music at a young age, or even if you're teaching adults, do you have books? Do you have methodologies? I mean, do you work from common resources, anything like that?
Yes, there is a book that has been published 15 years ago.
And this is Xavier Chevry's book?
No,
Jean Vivian's book? Okay.
The book
1991. So before that, it was just oral transmission, I guess.
There it is. Kind of the one and only book that there is for Bagad drumming. It's super cool, and of course, it's only in Francais. And even when there's now a couple books, right? There's Jean Pierre's, and then there's also Xavier's. Oh, okay, that's right. And so this and the one other that there is, it's cool because this is not just style and technique. This is music. This is learning to read music, learning to read notation, and learning the style all in one lump sum.
vieille méthode originale. I have the it's a
This is a new edition.
the new edition, but in the 60 méthode de Ferdi Carnet. J'ai un original.
The original. So
An older one. So there was an older one in the 60s, apparently.
whenever the book is published about specifically Bagad drumming and Bagad percussion, this guy right here is going to be the one that writes it, and then this guy is going to be the editor. And I will supply the Western preface. Yes. But it's interesting because, again, you know, I think that all of us, you know, in the Western path, you know, we learning, let's say, music theory and style are different things, because theory is the foundation, and we learn a whole bunch of styles all at the same time, right? Where they primarily, music is the style. It's all one thing. And so how these books present and deal with that is really interesting. So it's not that you're learning notation and then rudiments. You kind of learn the notation via the rudiments, or vice versa. You know?
Well, and I really like that, because one thing I find a lot of students struggle with is, like, in a drum set book, if someone writes out a rock beat, you don't really play a rock beat in the way that it's written. It's not that square and straight. So if you really learn it that way initially, it kind of makes sense that it sounds better.
100%, Ben. I agree with you there for sure.
Wonderful. Hey, Michael, how, you know, last I checked in with you, you were working on something called the Scottish Rudiment Project.
Yes.
And you had talked a lot about, I don't know if you remember this particular lovely thing, but you know, I've got a little
cooler than the outside.
I've got a little bulletin board over here, and it's right up there. It's right next to my list of phone numbers and things I need to know and keep handy. But
Awesome.
Can you give us an update, or is there an update? Is there anything new to say?
Sure, we can talk about this. So the Scottish Rudiment Project basically aims to make the first official published list of Scottish drumming rudiments. And of course, we're using the term Scottish drumming, that which is what we use here in Brittany, right? So though they only play Breton music, the style of drumming they play is Scottish drumming, right? So the Scottish drumming style certainly is unique enough to merit its own dictionary, its own vocabulary base, if you will. And so what we published there for PASIC, and what I now use pretty exclusively in my clinics and whatnot, is by no means official. This is not the list. This is the foundation of what we hope to be the published list. And to me, so the big association for pipe bands worldwide is called the RSPBA, the Royal Scottish Pipe Band Association, located in Glasgow. Really the goal is we need the stamp of approval from the RSPBA for it to be real. And in my opinion, it must also involve the Bretons. And so the system I've set up and the website I've built is a survey. And the survey is simply, here's a little figure, what could be a rudiment. Do you think this is a rudiment that belongs on the list? Yes, no, additional thoughts. Do you agree with the proposed name? Yes, no, additional thoughts. And so I think I have, on that thing we made for PASIC, I think I only put the most contrasting rudiments to American drumming. So even though we use some of the rudiments in American drumming, I only put the most unique on that list for PASIC. Whereas the entire list of Scottish rudiments there'd be some overlap, some carryover, like an open double stroke roll, a flam, you know, things like that. So what I want to do is survey basically the top 200-ish Scottish drummers in the world. So the criteria is very simple. If you have been the lead drummer of a grade 1 or a grade 2 Bagad or Scottish bagpipe band anywhere on the planet, you're invited to take this survey. And so that equals about 200 or so of us on the planet.
And where are you in that process? How many people have taken the survey?
Well, only a few, and only through by personal means, simply because I know that there are going to be, you know, some drummers out there, some Scottish drummers who don't see the value in this, so they're just not going to take the survey, and that's totally cool. But I have to, for a lot of them, again, they don't learn from rudiments, or they don't use 7-stroke roll, or even, you know, double paradiddle as a way to identify things. Some of them do, but a lot of them do not. And so the idea of changing either the way they think or the way they teach is, you know, that's a very personal thing. And so I understand that that can be kind of a disruption in their process. You know, I get that totally.
Speaking of that specifically, and maybe this is where you were going to, I remember you mentioning that there was kind of some, you kind of had some resistance to this project with the community. Has that changed? Is it still, I don't know, better, worse?
I certainly there's not a large resistance for the community as a whole by any means, but I think it was just you know, that's a good point to be made. It's basically what I was speaking to, that there are some, I know that there are some drummers out there who, let's say, you know, have called a paradiddle a floggamoogle, and if they've called it a floggamoogle for years, there's nothing on the planet that's going to change their mind, let alone some guy who's not Scottish and is from the United States. You know, where this idea is by no means about or for me. It's about and for all of us. It's something that I think the music deserves, the music as a whole, the percussive part of it individually, and it's a way for everyone to be more familiar with this enormous world of drumming that precedes, you know, what we do in the United States by decades, if not more than that.
No, go ahead, finish, please.
Simply to say that I understand that, you know, the resistance is going to come from the people that are a little bit more conservative and set in the way that they do things, which is totally understandable.
Do you think it's something like in the U.S., like we learn about something that isn't popular all over the place, and we think it's really cool, and then we say, like, oh my gosh, more people have to know about this. I have to share this. I have to show everyone this other cultural thing. But maybe one of the reasons there's resistance towards spreading it from the original source is that maybe that's just not, I don't know, they don't have that same tendency and urgency. They maybe say, like, no, well, that's what's kind of beautiful about it, like, let's keep it close. I don't know.
I agree. I think there could be some element of that because, again, I mean, obviously the way these two guys learned to play, don't need to change anything there. That worked out pretty well, you know. And so while I think having a set list of rudiments, like if there was something at the beginning of this book, I think it would be beneficial. It's certainly not a necessary component, clearly, you know. But I do think, however, in the United States, I think it could be largely impactful. Right now, I am the only American drummer or percussionist that comes over to Brittany every year. That's ridiculous. I think there's only me and Jake Otto are the only two Americans to come play in one of the top Bagads. I mean, perhaps ever. That's ridiculous. I don't want to be.
Guys, let's go. We should do an app percussion there.
Yeah, good. You know.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. The budget for app percussion is doing so hot right now. So I will, you know.
I know you guys are about to hit 8 digits or something, right? It's great.
Yeah, this is like episode 2, dude. The fund is what it is.
Absolutely. And even in the Scottish.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Even in the Scottish pipe band community, you know, to my knowledge, I think there's only about somewhere around 5 to 10 people on the planet who have advanced degrees in percussion and do Scottish drumming at a professional level. Only 5 to 10. And I think that is only due to lack of knowledge and exposure of the idiom. If this book, for example, were in English and were in regular distribution in the United States, you're going to even just see that picture and say, what in the world is that? What are they wearing? Why are they holding their sticks that way? And then you're going to check it out, you know? But we don't have anything like that. And so, yeah, again, the Scottish Rudiment Project aims to just help in the exposure for the awesome Breton and Scottish music.
I really
in
hope
that
that Steve
area-
Weiss Music is listening.
So in that area, then totally makes sense on our side. But I'm wondering for Tangi and Ronan, do you think that resources like this would be helpful? You mentioned that you teach a little bit. Do you think that resources like this would be helpful for you in your teaching, or do you think everything's going just fine?
We can always improve things. So yes,
Yeah.
I'm as well thinking of doing my own notebook, but at least some, yes, a small book for at least Cap Caval students. I would like, because we also all have our way to see things, how to teach it. So of course we can always improve things, especially about teaching.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, wonderful. You know, when I look at Mike's Scottish Rudiment project, just the sheet he made for PASIC, yeah, it's like, man, I need this. Like, unless I go there, which I would love to go back to Scotland. I think Scotland is amazing. I've been to Glasgow and Edinburgh before, and they're just like gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. But it's like it would take me an enormous amount of time to absorb that without the project. So I see what it does for me, for sure. But hey, you guys, thank you so much. We're gonna wrap here in just a minute. Michael, is there anything that you have coming up soon, or anything that we could plug for you right now that watchers might be able to go view or check out or should know about?
Well, both of these cool idioms that we're speaking about, the Bagad Championships and the World Pipe Band Championships, are both live streamed. And the World Pipe Band Championships are streamed through the BBC, and I do believe that they leave a lot of the stream on the website after the contest, right? So even if you didn't get a chance to watch it live, or if you're seeing this episode well past the date of August 16, 15, whatever it was, you can still see the BBC live stream of the World Pipe Band Championships on their website pretty easily. And for the Bagad Championships, where can people go to check out some of the stream that they may have missed?
Well, I guess easier would be on YouTube. You can check for Bagad Cap Caval, and you will see our latest competitions.
Absolutely. And again, we'll send you guys some links and some this and that, so you can check out some of this wacky stuff that we're talking about, for sure. I guess as far as me personally, I don't think there's any particular projects to plug per se. There's certainly a lot of really awesome things that we're doing with Gallant Entertainment Inc. out of New York City, beyond playing for all of the professional sport teams. There's a lot of good work we're doing together there. And as far as me, you know, personally, the Ruff Drags is kind of an ongoing project of mine. So basically the things Casey Cangelosi and I have done together have been Ruff Drag projects. And what the Ruff Drags, you know, it's a concept, and it simply is out to find or perhaps create other rudimental drummers like myself. So if I find guys like Ronan and Tangi, who are masters of Breton and Scottish drumming, to play Ruff Drag material with me, the music that I write, I then would have to teach them American drumming and maybe some Swiss drumming to accompany their Scottish drumming. Whereas if I take American guys, I have to teach them Scottish or Breton drummings and style, so then I can write this music that uses all of it collectively, simultaneously, and we can do these wild and wacky things together. And these two guys, I mean, I've been trying to get them, you know, to fly to the United States or to some other place for me, so we can do some of these projects together. Ronan has come to New York City now twice, and we did a big, what they call in Brittany, a Fesno, so a party at night, with Gallant Entertainment Inc. and Ronan and other members of Cap Caval, and it was certainly one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life. And getting to fuse, you know, a contemporary American-style drum line with master Brett musicians was fantastic. Did you enjoy that, Ronan? Ça bien, Ronan?
Super.
Oh, excellent, génial. It was a really cool thing. So similar projects like that, I don't think there's anything that I would like to announce just yet that's coming up, but there's certainly efforts being made, I should say, to advertise a little bit more about some of the cool things that we're doing in New York City to help fuse these styles of drumming together.
Cool, man. Thank you so much, Tangi, Ronan, and Mike Eagle, buddy. It's always great to talk to you, and yeah, you have such good things to say all the time. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. And I agree with Michael. I hope you guys can come to the States. You know have connections. You know Megan Arns at University of Missouri. You know Ben Charles at Florida Atlantic University, and you know Laurel and I at James Madison University. So, man, Michael, we'll have to have you on again sometime. That was really great. We could keep going, no problem.
Okay.
Everyone, thanks so much. We'll see you later.